Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Spirit of the Celtic Gods and Goddesses, Their History, Magical Power, and Healing Energies, by Carl Mccolman and Catherine Hines. Foreword by Courtney Weber. Narrated by Leslie Howard. Foreword. Fairy maidens, magic swords, dragons and cursed swans, ancestral mounds, and gods that arrived on an emerald island on ships from the sky. The sound of pipers at dawn, and mists that shrouded secrets for millennia. These intoxicating elements have lured seekers to Celtic mythology for generations, and still do. Like an enchanted well with no bottom, the stories get richer the deeper we dive into them. There is no limit to the magic of the Celtic world. No one person can absorb it all in one lifetime, although it's certainly tempting to try. The Celtic cultures have circled the world via the hearts and stories of those who emigrated. The tides have turned, and today, instead of venturing into the new and unknown, many people are seeking the old, the mists, the maidens, the cauldrons, and the wells. Some spiritual seekers are returning to their ancestral roots, while others find home on paths that would have been foreign to their ancestors. Why is this happening? Perhaps during this era when our world is threatened by climate change and more, we yearn to return to a time when the divine was not disembodied and looking down upon us in judgment, but rather a presence in the very soil and roots of the trees around us. When I began my own pagan journey, I sought truth. Who were the gods? Did the powerful Brigid truly call out to me, or was she simply a figment of my own projections? Was the Morrigan truly terrifying, or was the fear surrounding her a symptom of centuries of patriarchy? I found few answers in those early days. The internet was still a fledgling tool. Few writers were blogging, even fewer blogging about the Celts. There were plentiful books on Celtic mythology, but they were either dryly academic and devoid of the magic I so desperately wanted, or so saturated in subjective experience that they felt disconnected from their original source. Imagine the joy I felt when I found The Spirit of the Celtic Gods and Goddesses. Finally, a text that breathed life into the academic and gave shape to the experiential. Writers of the Victorian era and even some modern revisionist traditions erase the more unsavory details of the gods. In more recent years, perhaps in reaction to such revisions, stringent adherence to academic sources among pagans has created a kind of orthodoxy, often leaving would-be practitioners too intimidated to follow their own soul's calling. The strict academic path is the way for some, the purely experiential the best for others. But there's a place where those two paths can meet, and that is where we find this book. Carl Mccolman and Catherine Hines created an important middle path. Mccolman and Hines emphasize the beauty without ignoring the ugly, all the while offering specific, practical ways that curious seekers might connect with them. They never shied away from the reality of these myths, even when that reality meant that sometimes these deities were cruel or crude, rather than kind and benevolent. It's not a book to inhale, set aside, and race off to the next one. While a gentle experience, it's also a journey. Each chapter takes you into the world of a different deity, their story, strengths, weaknesses, their helpful attributes, but also how they can be harmful. The Abrahamic traditions created the legacy that gods are all-powerful, but in many cultures around the world, including those of the Celtic countries, the gods could make mistakes, and often did. They could and would badger humans just for fun. In my experiences as pagan, this is often true. Mccolman and Hines make no excuses for these traits of these deities. They are not all goodness and light, just waiting to help us out like fairy godmothers or godfathers. At the same time, they acknowledge them as beings of great power and wisdom, compassion and mercy. They provide guidance on when to approach these deities and ask us to consider how they might impact our lives, but this is offered more as perspective than warning. Listeners are encouraged to follow their hearts with self-awareness, asking themselves if a specific deity is right for their path at this specific time, or perhaps one to approach at a different point. It's a book that is practical in its approach, yet filled with heart and love for these remarkable beings and stories. This book is a gateway. It should be approached with the same wonder that brought you to the Celtic path in the first place. My advice is to sit with each chapter after completing it, to pause and absorb the new information. It may seem that Mccolman and Hines leave you wanting more. They do, but not because they withhold information, but because they spark our curiosity. They have given us seekers, both the new and the seasoned, a true gift. You are about to start a remarkable journey. May your path be blessed. Courtney Weber, author of The Morrigan and Brigid, September 2019. Part 1. Introduction. Chapter 1. Entering the Other World. We'd like to invite you into a fascinating world. It's a world shaped by history and mythology, by ancient stories and modern spiritual yearning. It's a mystical world where mortals encounter immortals, where humans live and love alongside powerful beings who can only be called gods and goddesses. It's a world of magic and miracles, of heroes and heroines with extraordinary abilities who fight fearsome enemies and heart-stopping demons. It's a world where virtues such as honor, hospitality, courage, wisdom, and sovereignty, freedom, matter. Where both gods and mortals are willing to fight and die for such eternal values. Finding your way into this world today is a challenge, for only fragments of stories and legends and lore about this magical realm have come down to us from our ancestors of old. And yet, enough information exists that we can piece together a picture of this majestic world and make it our spiritual home. Indeed, both of us, Carl and Catherine, have found our mystical center in this world, and through our visionary excursions there, embraced a spirituality of meaning, power, love, and joy. And now we invite you to journey there with us. This world is the realm of Celtic myth. It is a place of promise, of eternal youth, of frightening conflict, but of glorious victory. It is a place brimming with mythic beings, some of whom are truly deities, others are semi-divine, others are gifted but mortal, heroes and heroines. For simplicity's sake, we'll refer in this book to the entire community of mythical beings as gods and goddesses. Alas, the Celtic mythological realm, often called the other world, is also a place deeply shrouded in mystery and frequently misunderstood. We have no Bible or sacred text to tell us everything we need to know about this world. Instead, to find our spiritual home, we must rely on a variety of sources, from archaeology to medieval manuscripts to living folklore, none of which give us a comprehensive picture of ancient Celtic spirituality, but all of which, taken together, provide a tantalizing overview of the beauty and glory that our ancestors found in their dealings with their gods and goddesses. Incidentally, when we talk about our ancestors, they can be understood in two ways. If you come from a Celtic land, such as Wales, Ireland, or Brittany, then you can claim the Celts as your biological ancestors. But even if you don't have a single strand of Celtic DNA, you could still claim the Celts as your spiritual ancestors, ancestors of the heart. Either way, the magical realm of Celtic myth comes to us from our ancestors. And it is our great privilege here in the 21st century to call out to the gods and goddesses of our ancestors, to honor and venerate them, and to breathe new life into this ancient and noble spiritual path. This book is by no means an exhaustive introduction to the spirituality of Celtic myth. Far from it. Rather, it is kind of like a first date. When you go out with someone for the first time, your evening is spent getting to know each other just enough to decide if it would be nice to keep dating. Similarly, our hope for this book is to give you enough of an introduction to some of the major gods and goddesses of the Celtic world so that you can decide if Celtic spirituality is something you'd like to pursue seriously. An often misunderstood spirituality. The realm of Celtic myth is often misunderstood among today's spiritual seekers. Many people feel drawn to the magic of the Celts, whether because of their ancestry, their spiritual inclinations, or simply their love for a romantic ideal that is epitomized in fairy stories and legends of Merlin and King Arthur. Sadly, though, relatively little reliable literature seems to be available on what the ancient Celts truly believed, and about the many gods and goddesses they worshipped. Scholars have identified well over 400 Celtic gods and goddesses. Most of the books being published are either fascinating but expensive and hard to find, scholarly and academic monographs, or else New Age titles that are written for a wide readership, but too often seem to lack any real grounding in the exciting world of Celtic spirituality as it truly existed, and has been documented in medieval manuscripts as well as in modern Celtic folklore. In fact, we recommend that whenever you read a book that claims to offer spiritual teachings from the Celtic world, check the bibliography. Did the author take the time to do research into the history of the Celts? Or is the teaching mostly based on the author's own psychic or intuitive ideas? Even if the author has good intentions, we would encourage you to stick with books that are grounded in solid research, because so much of the material that has been published about the Celts has, alas, been based in subjective fantasy rather than reliable history. In spirit of the Celtic gods and goddesses, we are attempting to bring the two worlds of scholarship and spirituality together. With this book, we are not contributing anything new to the academic world of Celtic studies, but rather we are drawing on what Celtic scholars have discovered about the ancient lore and presenting this knowledge in a way that can be applied to modern spirituality. Of course, this is a project fraught with danger, for even with all the archaeological research and studies of medieval manuscripts and Celtic folklore that have been conducted over the years, there are still far too many holes in our knowledge. Anyone who wishes to honor the old gods and goddesses in a meaningful way today will have to adapt what little we know to the demands of modern life and fill in the many gaps as best we can with our 21st century sensibilities, hoping to steer our spirituality in a direction that is both meaningful for us and pleasing to the deities. Why bother? Before we go any further, let's consider for a moment why anyone should bother studying, let alone honoring or venerating, the old gods and goddesses of the Celtic tradition. What is the point of bringing these deities back to life in today's world? We believe there are many benefits to a renewed Celtic spirituality. Here are just a few thoughts on this matter. As you explore your unique relationship with the gods, you may find your own reasons for pursuing a spiritual connection with them. The gods and goddesses connect us with the Celtic soul. This is really just a restatement of the first part of this chapter. The deities and mythic heroes of Ireland, Wales, and Gaul do not exist in a vacuum. They arise out of a culture of magic, poetry, storytelling, and valor. Their spirit is truly the Celtic spirit. If we want to walk the Celtic path, it begins by getting to know these powerful entities. And the best way to get to know them is through entering their natural habitat, the realm of stories, myths, legends, and lore. The deities connect us with our ancestors. As we've said, whether we regard the ancient Celts as biological forebears or simply ancestors of the heart, they have played a decisive role in shaping who we are today. Celtic spirituality, like most other primal faiths, emphasizes the importance of honoring the ancestors. What better way to do that by getting to know and venerating their gods and goddesses? The deities connect us with the Celtic understanding of the cosmos. Spirituality is more than just a psychological tool for achieving happiness or feeling at peace with the world. It is a tool for knowing who we are and where we fit into the universe. Celtic spirituality, therefore, invites us to relate to the cosmos from a specifically Celtic perspective. This includes seeing the universe as filled with the presence of ancestral and divine spirits, regarding nature herself as sacred, and seeing such things as rivers, wells, stones, trees, mountains, fire, and countless other elements of the cosmos as filled with luminous meaning, in short, with soul. It means seeing death not as the end of life, but as a transition to a visionary world known as the Land of Promise, or the Land of Youth, among other appellations. It means believing that the spiritual otherworld is interwoven with the physical world in such a way that assumes the nearness rather than the remoteness of divinity in the cosmos. All this and more is to be found through the Celtic gods and goddesses. Their stories can help us find meaning in our lives. Like many mythic tales from cultures around the world, the stories of the Celtic deities and heroes cover a wide emotional and dramatic terrain. In these stories, we encounter passionate love, treacherous duplicity, fearless courage, raw sex, clever trickery, honest effort, trusting patience, hopeful perseverance, and countless other feelings and actions. Through the richly textured lives of the mythic heroes, we find ways to understand the emotions and passions of our own journeys. Not only that, but these stories are often entertaining, suspenseful, and at times really humorous. All of these elements in the myths, of course, are aspects of the spiritual world that find reflection in our mundane universe. The deities can be a gateway to believing and living in an alternative way. A wise Irish priest once told me, Carl, that Celtic spirituality is about having an alternative vision. In other words, being able to see things in ways other than what big government, big business, or big religion would have us see. Celtic spirituality is a path of hope through choices, and the mythic lives of the gods and goddesses can help us recognize those choices and alternative visions. For example, the Celtic myths invite us to see the cosmos in terms of polytheism, many gods and goddesses, rather than the strict monotheism of most major religions. The gods and goddesses are healers and warriors, striving to make their world a better place, not just giving in to the forces that may appear to be bigger than they are. Most of all, through the deities and heroes and their dramatic tales, we can remember that Celtic spirituality stands for eternal values, for a world where consumerism and materialism are not the dominant powers that shape our lives. Celtic spirituality gives us hope that there's more to life than what can be found at the mall. The deities personify the reality of magic beyond the physical universe. Magic and mysticism are loaded words subject to misinterpretation and all sorts of confusion. For now, let's just say that magic, the exercise of spiritual power, and mysticism, the journey towards spiritual bliss and enlightenment, invite us to a deeper or higher experience of life than we can normally encounter in the mundane physical world we inhabit. This is another aspect of the alternative vision of Celtic spirituality. But here, the gods and goddesses invite us to make that alternative vision part of our own personal experience, so that we can transform the universe from the inside out. When we learn the ancient lore or encounter the deities through ritual or meditation, we are invited to become students of their spiritual power and conduits for their luminous joy. The gods and goddesses are a source of blessing and power. If there's one reason why anyone, of any religious persuasion, pursues the spiritual life, it's probably this: to receive blessings. It's a universal part of spirituality, from the Catholic Mass, which always ends with the priest blessing his congregation, to modern Druid ceremonies such as those practiced by Arn Driocht Féin, built around the universal human desire to receive spiritual benefits in their lives. A key incentive to prayer and magic is the quest for blessings of some sort, to manifest desires that are quite earthly in nature, a new job, a new girlfriend, or more spiritual yearnings, peace of mind, a sense of purpose. Connecting with the Celtic deities means opening up a channel to ask for and receive blessings from them. The deities help us to become better people. Blessings are wonderful, but they are only half of the value of spirituality. Equally important for any spiritual or religious path is the way it supports its adherents in finding healing, maturity, virtue, and holiness. Celtic spirituality is holistic, so it's not just about becoming a paragon of self-denial. In fact, in the Celtic world, that would not necessarily be seen as a good thing. Rather, it supports us in becoming well-rounded and whole. It advocates courage and physical strength, wisdom and mental ability, magic and spiritual prowess, but also old-fashioned virtues such as honor, treating others with respect, hospitality, sharing of your abundance with others, and integrity, being a person of your word. How do the gods facilitate this? They model the virtues that are worth cultivating, as well as sometimes exhibiting the foibles of a life without virtue or self-improvement. The deities remind us of our own divinity. There are many different ways to approach the gods and goddesses of Celtic or any mythology. In Chapter 3, we'll discuss the possible ways to think about the deities, but it is not the purpose of this book to tell you what to believe. That being said, we would like to end this chapter by making a case for deity or godhood being something that flows with abundance from the other world to our mundane world. Not only are the gods and goddesses divine, but also the fairies, the spirits of the natural world, and the ancestors partake in their divinity. As Celtic lore sees it, our universe shimmers with sacred presence, and you and I share in this divine plenitude. The gods are not way up there and we mortals way down here. On the contrary, the gods live in our minds and hearts. We are their sacred temples. Our bodies are the altars where they are worshipped and adored. The Celtic gods and goddesses invite us to experience our own divinity, and, by doing so, must join them in the ever-unfolding task of creating and recreating the cosmos in which we live. New Agers love to say, you create your own reality. In the Celtic cosmos, it's seen a bit differently. We mortals join with the deities in co-creating all things. Many benefits and blessings can flow from a spirituality centered on the Celtic heroes and deities. We hope that as you learn about the different gods and goddesses and explore ways to honor them in your own life, you will discover for yourself how they are bringers of joy and blessing. May your journey into their divine presence be delightful and fruitful, and may the information in this book help you to find your own way into the magical Celtic otherworld. Chapter 2. An overview of the Celtic tradition. The Celtic spiritual tradition is a multifaceted jewel. Some of these facets are Christian. The ones we discuss in this book are pagan. This means that we are working with pre-Christian notions of the divine and its relationship to human life. These ideas have been treated in a variety of ways throughout the past 15 or so centuries. They've been rejected, reinterpreted, rediscovered, reconstructed, studied, sometimes romanticized, often misunderstood. The bottom line is that in spite of, and sometimes because of, all that the worship of the old goddesses and gods has been through, it has survived and continues to live and grow. The Celtic pagan traditions that we now work with cannot help differing from those of the distant past. We have lost so much ancient lore. We have so little knowledge of ancient religious practices, and the lore, beliefs, and practices that have survived to the present have come to us garbed in extra layers accumulated through the centuries. Time, language, technology, the ways that Western culture has developed, these and other factors have placed us at a great distance from the ancient Celts. For a large number of us, that distance is compounded by geography. We may live an ocean away from the continent and the islands where Celtic spirituality developed, flourished, and to a greater or lesser extent, remains embedded to this day. Our first step toward a fuller understanding of Celtic deities, then, is to go back to their roots. At this point, we need to answer a fundamental question. What do we mean by Celtic? Well, there's actually a fair amount of debate among scholars over this term. Some prefer to use it in a narrow sense, restricting it to the Celtic branch of the Indo-European language family. The modern Celtic languages are Irish, Manx, Scottish Gaelic, Welsh, Breton, and Cornish. In ancient times, Celtic dialects were spoken from Ireland to Romania, as well as in the central Turkish region of Galatia. Gaulish, the Celtic tongue of what is now France and Belgium, with parts of Germany, Switzerland, and the Netherlands, was in everyday use until about the 5th century, and is the most ancient Celtic language in which we have any written records, in the form of inscriptions on altars and the like. A number of scholars give Celtic not only a linguistic, but also a cultural meaning. The Celts were a group of peoples who shared a common language, with many dialects or variants, and a common culture. Similar ways of making and decorating material goods, similar ways of organizing society, similar ways of approaching religion. On top of this, Celtic can also refer to an ethnic group, people who share not only language and culture, but also a common place of origin. In this book, we use Celtic in the combined linguistic and cultural sense, and leave the question of ethnicity for scholars to debate. Sources for tradition. Throughout this book, we will refer to 3 principal sources for Celtic pagan spiritual traditions: archaeology, literature, and folklore. Archaeology provides us with information through images,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?